Hello. It is Thursday, and I have two great guests joining me today. I wanted to catch up with David Daley of Fair Vote give an update. I'm so confused with all of what's happening, the machinations around gerrymandering, especially as a result of the gutting of the Voting Rights Act. So I reached out to Dave Daley, and we caught up yesterday. You could have watched that live on YouTube or Substack, but that conversation begins at an hour and 7 minutes. First, I got a first-timer today. Fascinating guy. Really interesting, very funny, different type of interview that I thoroughly enjoyed. His name is Joey Santore, and he's written a book called Concrete Botany, The Ecology of Plants in the Age of Human Disturbance. You might not think you're interested in plants and ecology. I guarantee this guy makes you interested in it. I guarantee. He's a huge YouTube star. Many of you already know who he is. But I hope that you listen to my conversation with Joey. It begins at 34 minutes. Happy Thursday to you. It's Hangout night. I hope to see you tonight at 8 p.m. if you're a paid subscriber. If not, sign up now and join us. I'll try to invite a special guest through. It's either Dean Blundell or maybe somebody else. A lot of people showed up last week for Atima Omara, and so we'll try to do that again tonight. Hope to see you at 8 p.m. Also, thank you for any ideas on the show format or constructive criticism. I got a couple of notes on Patreon, on the Patreon page. People made comments, and I will share them with you to encourage you to send constructive criticism. I do like it as much as I say I do. I want to get better. I want the show to get better. I want to be better. Bring it. No matter, roast me. I'm all right with it. I can take it. I promise you. All right. So that is the opening. I think that's all I wanted to say here at the top. Thank you for all the ideas on show format. I'll get a survey out to you soon. And just, I guess, most importantly, this is an ad-free show. There are no ads. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I have to take my headphones out or take my phone out or go to my watch and fast forward through all the commercials. It's frustrating. Sometimes I'm out often in the lawn, and I've got gloves on. It's annoying. You're on the rowing machine, Sean. Yeah, no ads. Appreciate it. Thank you very much, but I can't do it without your paid subscription. And I woke up this morning to a new one from Stephen O, which put a little beat in my steps. Thank you very much, Stephen. Appreciate that. Welcome. Patreon.com/PeteDominic, or you can go over to Substack and subscribe there for as little as $5 or a lot more, like many of you do. And I'm very grateful for it because I can't do the show without it. All right, let's get to those headlines right now. We've got a bull in a china shop. The bull is our president, Gasolini. He's over there telling Xi how honored he is to be his friend and probably giving him everything he wants, is my guess. And we'll talk more about that in a moment, but also wanted to mention some of the other headlines. The Senate voted to install Kevin Warsh as the chair of the Federal Reserve. I'm sure he's going to be great with monetary policy. The guy wouldn't even admit that Trump lost the election in 2020, but he has been confirmed. So he's a millionaire himself, like a multi-millionaire, and now he's got the reins of America's monetary policy. So I'm sure he'll remain independent from any influence from the guy who gave him the job. All right, what else can I tell you? Wholesale prices in April posted their highest annual increase in more than 3 years. Everybody's talking about these inflation numbers and how bad they are. Even Lawrence Kudlow on Fox Business said it to Kevin Hassett. I'll give you that clip in a moment. The producer price index rose a seasonally adjusted 1.4% for the month, much higher than the 0.5 Dow Jones consensus forecast and the upwardly revised 0.7 March increase. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported all this yesterday. It was the largest monthly gain in inflation since March 2022. How about it? Well, yesterday there was a major vote in the Senate for to give authorization to Trump for his stupid war. Republican divisions over the war now are deepening as 3 GOP senators voted with Democrats to curtail the conflict, signaling headwinds for General Fitton as he seeks to stem economic impacts that have damaged the party's political standing. While the Democratic-led measure failed, it was the closest War Powers vote came to advancing in the Senate in the 7 attempts since the war began, as Republican concerns slowly grow over the path forward. Those inflation numbers can't help, huh? Guess who doesn't care nearly as much about it? Iranians. Yeah, They don't. They can take a lot more pain than we can. I think most of the world can. We're really snowflakes here. The Department of Homeland Security selected a new ICE chief, and he's a former private prison executive. So that's great. His name is David Venturella, and I'm sure he's going to go through some things like his predecessor, Todd Lyons. Had mental breakdowns all the time. Apparently he was in the hospital a couple of times. And so we'll see what happens with his leadership. And in a related story, apparently the Trump administration has lost 10,000 times in court. 10,000 individual cases as federal judges grapple with the way agents have swept through major U.S. cities, detained thousands of people in support of this extremist white supremacist agenda of his. And now that's 10,000 losses. What a waste. What an absolute waste of time and resources. Nothing more wasteful in government than fraudulent court cases like that being brought at that level. All right, there's probably plenty of things more wasteful, like maybe a war. And there was a discharge petition in the House yesterday, a bipartisan effort to force vote on legislation to send fresh American security aid to Ukraine. It got the 218 signatures needed to force a floor vote, the latest in a series of instances of rank-and-file lawmakers wresting control of the chamber's agenda from Republican leaders. So that's also really good news. And just getting back to that top story that the president and his team, 3 cabinet secretaries, and his dumb son, Eric, they're all in China. They started their meetings last night. Apparently, they're supposed to be discussing tariffs, Taiwan, sanctions, purchases of American farm products, the AI race. Deal expectations for a deal are pretty low. It'll be interesting to see whether or not Trump brings up the war in Iran, because China has a pretty strong relationship with them. Also, we need the rare earth minerals that China dominates the production of to rebuild the supply of missiles that we have, and they don't necessarily want us to. And, the psychological profile the Chinese must have on Trump must simply say, if you compliment him, he'll give you whatever you want. And if not, just pay him, and then he'll give you whatever you want. Another huge story that looks like may be coming, may not, hard to know. We'll know in a week or so whether or not there's a settlement between Donald Trump, the president of the United States, and his Department of Justice. He's basically suing himself, and Chris Hayes was apoplectic about this. I've got a clip of him explaining this in a minute, but also wanted to mention, let's see here, the government has started to refund some of the roughly $160 billion collected from tariffs plus interest. That dude Alex Murdaugh's murder convictions have been overturned because because shocking interference by a court clerk. I don't know what the hell that's all about. The only reason I read it is because the guy's still in jail. He's not getting out of jail because he's serving decades-long state sentences for embezzlement. And the South Carolina Attorney General's office plans to prosecute him again. So this is huge headlines yesterday. It made everybody think that he was getting out of jail. He murdered his wife and his son. And a lot of people, maybe you follow this. This is one of those TV trials because it was so sensational. But he's not getting out of jail. So I just wanted to make sure people weren't thinking too much about that. There's a new report on failing test scores concluding that U.S. students have been in a decade-long learning recession. Don't blame the teachers. Look up your school district scores and ask about why, and get involved in your school board elections, which I am right now. We are 6 days away here in Clarkstown. And finally, a Dutch village is hoping that the skeleton it dug up in a church is Count D'Artagnan, Alexandre Dumas's fourth musketeer. Wow, that sounds pretty fascinating. And those are your headlines. Let's get to the clips that I've got for you today. But before I do, I want to mention just some constructive criticism I got on my interview with Barry Ritholtz. Jeffrey said, I hope you appreciate constructive criticism as much as you claim you do. Whatever Barry Ritholtz was fidgeting with on his desktop is nowhere near as annoying as listening to you whine about it to no end. I mean, I don't know. I get a lot of criticism when there are issues with the sound and when people are making noises. Yeah. So, and I thought it was funny to make fun of him. I like taking the piss out of him, and I had a good laugh at that. Maybe you had to see it, but yeah, sorry about that one. And then the second part of Jeffrey's criticism was that I was interrupting him. Why are you cutting Barry off when he's in the middle of a great rant just to interject your opinion? Isn't the point of your podcast to hear what really smart people have to say? Just listen and ask smart questions. When you try to interject another example of some related point, it just sounds like you're trying to impress either your audience or your guest with your knowledge on the subject. I hope you know the only reason I'm commenting is my desire to help you improve. This is not an attempt to slap you down. Well, thank you, Jeffrey. I hear a lot of interviewers do that as well, interjecting something to try to impress their guests especially. And I have known to do it. So if I did that, I cop to it. And I try not to. Sometimes I often hold myself back from it. And then Chris agreed, especially on point 2. One of the first interviews I've had to turn off in a long time because Pete wouldn't let Barry talk. Sounding exasperated and talking over people doesn't help your argument, no matter the point. I think you might have been talking about his defense of Elon Musk. And it's interesting because I got like more than a few comments saying thank you for pushing back on Barry on the Elon Musk thing. Maybe it wasn't that. Maybe it was something else. But I do appreciate your constructive criticism, no matter where it comes from. I'm a judgmental guy when it comes to broadcasting and all of this stuff, and I always have opinions, so I definitely want to hear yours. It's best sent in an email. These ones were on Patreon comments, which is fine, but I don't usually check them as much. But standupwithpete@gmail.com, standupwithpete@gmail.com. Put constructive criticism or show format ideas or whatever you have to make the show better in the subject, and I will get right to it. Thank you. All right, now let's do the clips. We got to start with this speech from a resident of Louisiana named Only Marchand is how he identified himself. He was wearing a red hat that says Trump was wrong about everything. And he gave this really emotional, amazing speech to lawmakers at a state Senate hearing over redistricting on Monday. And I don't know if it was originally shared by The Root or who, but this went viral. I saw everybody sharing it. I did. And so here it is. He nails it. Thank you, Marchand. Well done. Bravo. Straight to these Confederates' faces.
I have no doubt in my mind that the map's going to pass. If y'all can give us less than 0 seats, you would do it. Y'all do this under the orders of somebody that said the Civil Rights Act was harmful to white people, that it caused reverse racism. RFK said that black children are overfilled on antidepressants and that they need to be reparented on different forms, all of them. Pete Hegseth constantly brings Doug Wilson to the Pentagon to give a prayer service. Doug Wilson is the same pastor that said that slave owners were on strong spiritual ground. I don't have no belief in no morality on anybody that followed Donald Trump. If you wasn't with this map, you wouldn't be underneath this president. You wouldn't be in your party. You would stand up. You would stand against it. You would speak out about it. So as far as I'm concerned, if you here as one of these Trump Republicans, you already showed us who you are. You showed us what you want to do. And I believe the country as a whole is rebuking your party. Y'all are in a death spiral. That's why y'all have to redistrict. That's why y'all have to cheat. That's why Trump got to go to Texas and say he entitled to 5 more seats. It's because y'all know what y'all doing is abhorrent. We letting our people die in Iran based on false pretense that Tulsi Gabbard and Joe Kent say it ain't real. Y'all okay with all that. So I'm positive y'all gonna be okay with the maps. But the beautiful thing is, the children that y'all have made and the people that's younger than y'all don't support none of this racism that y'all want. The MAGA party is the last breath of the Confederacy, and I'll be happy to see millennials and Gen Z bury y'all. There will be no more of your party. The midterms gonna come, y'all gonna get wiped out. Trump gonna get dragged out of the White House, and I'm gonna love every second of it. Because y'all loved every second of the suffering that he caused to everybody in this country. And worldwide, we starve in Cuba. We bomb Nigeria. We holding Zimbabwe and Zambia hostage for their minerals. We don't want to give them aid support. The pro-lifers that say all life is special, Y'all letting kids die of AIDS. What part of your Bible say that? Point out the scripture. I think everybody would love to see it. And we would love to see y'all in the midterms.
My Lord, he set them afire. That was so gratifying to hear and see a young black man talk that way to those old white supremacists, Louisiana lawmakers. And that's why I went viral. Well done, sir. I hope he gets real famous off of that and does more of it, because that was so excellent. I don't know how he tied it all together. It was really good. And he just, no stammering, just straight ahead. So good. All right. Now let's get to Chris Hayes on All In, one of my favorite corporate media shows. I often listen to the podcast on double speed. And so last night, Chris Hayes was exasperated. He just was apoplectic at the top of the show. And this doesn't capture all of it, but this is probably the most important part of what he had to say. Here it is.
The New York Times, citing 3 people familiar, reports that in the coming days, Trump's Department of Justice may pay out $10 billion or more to Donald Trump to settle his lawsuit against the IRS. Trump filed that suit back in January, saying the agency should have done more to prevent the leak of his tax returns during the 2020 presidential campaign. The president, in effect, sued himself for more than $10 billion, or he sued the government he controls. $10 billion, by the way, is nearly the entire annual IRS budget. And those dollars, if paid out, would come from the U.S. Treasury, which he also oversees. Now, this is so novel, I don't really know how you characterize it legally. Like, we're out past the frontier. Whether legal or not, I am of the strong opinion, and I think many would be also, that this is an attempt at the largest theft ever by an American politician. Plainly, flagrantly, blatantly, in plain daylight. It is a conflict of interest so enormous, the term itself, conflict of interest, hardly begins to capture what's happening. In fact, get this. Last month, a federal judge in the case, a woman named Kathleen Williams, she's the federal judge who's been assigned this lawsuit, right? She gave Trump's private lawyers and the government's attorneys, right, because it's Trump's lawyers and the DOJ attorneys that he controls, she gave them until May 20th to come back and explain how the case isn't a scam to enrich Trump. She's like, wait a second. The Constitution requires cases or controversies, but I don't see one here. She writes, although President Trump avers he is bringing this lawsuit in his personal capacity, he is a sitting president, and his named adversaries are entities whose decisions are subject to his direction. She added, this raises questions here over whether the parties, Donald Trump and Donald Trump, are truly antagonistic to each other. They would have to be antagonistic to each other for this to actually be a case or controversy as defined by the U.S. Constitution. What the judge is saying is like, I don't think this is actually a real case. It can't be you're on both sides. So the lawyers have one more week to file briefs that would convince the judge to let Trump's $10 billion lawsuit continue.
All right. Well, I'm not going to let Chris Hayes continue because I have a show to do, but I highly recommend you watch that whole segment. All right. Moving on. Let's go to a local reporter, Fox 8 in Greensboro, North Carolina, where a Greensboro mother there is slamming her representative, North Carolina's Virginia Fox, that old crazy lady who serves in the House and I think is the leader of a committee. Anyway, Christian, her 10-year-old boy, sent a letter because it was an assignment for school. And, well, let's let the Fox reporter explain it. And we get to hear from young Christian, too.
2038 is only 12 years away, and you and your classmates will be responsible for the debt.
A message from Republican North Carolina Congresswoman Virginia Fox that was sent to 10-year-old Christian Mango. Christian says certain words she said.
I could understand like half of it, not all of it.
His mother, Emily Mango, says the reply from Fox was in regards to an assignment from Christian's teacher at Canterbury School in Greensboro.
Christian and his class, they're in 4th grade, they wrote a persuasive essay of their choosing, and they mailed it off to a representative, a CEO, whoever the decision maker was that could be influential in hearing their persuasive essay points.
Christian says the topic he chose,
we should have a $5,000 tax rebate for electric cars because they're better than normal cars. They're better for the environment, you pay less, and there's no gas.
Christian says in April he mailed the essay to Fox in a Canterbury school envelope with 4th grade on the return address. A few weeks later, the school received this letter from Representative Fox via email. While the congresswoman thanked the 10-year-old for contacting her, she disagreed with his proposal. Fox cited 6 articles from news organizations such as Fox News and Wall Street Journal. But towards the end of her response, she attacked Christian's teacher.
Ask your teacher to explain propaganda to you, but I will never be able to know. My guess is that your teacher will not be able to give you a good educational experience by helping you to be able to think as they are too interested in indoctrinating you. How sad.
After Christian's mother explained to him what Fox's response meant, the 10-year-old says he's upset Fox went after his teacher when Christian was the one who chose the topic of his essay.
I think that was wrong.
And why?
Because the school didn't do anything.
Emily Mango slammed Fox's response on social media and is now demanding an apology.
Yeah. I saw that go viral yesterday. You may have already heard it, but I thought it was great to hear from young Christian himself. And that was a really important, that's a good mom right there too, I think. Yeah, call her out. Good. That lady is terrible. All right, let's go to Lawrence Kudlow of Fox Business confronting the White House economic chief advisor, Kevin Hassett, about the terrible new numbers on inflation.
Certainly on the surface, you got to admit, today's CPI was a lousy number, 0.6%. Core ex-food and energy still up 0.4%. So the 12-month change is 3.8%, and the core change is 2.8%. What does an NEC director say on a day like today when the CPI is coming out so poorly?
Well, first of all, this is a temporary energy shock, and that's very clearly in the data. And so the history of this is that people at the Federal Reserve and elsewhere tend to peer through energy shocks and use core CPI to forecast the future, not the energy shock data. And so that's really, if you're thinking about like what's going to happen over the next 6, 8, 10 months, then the best way to forecast that is movement in core. Now, core did blip up a little bit in this, not nearly as much as the top line because of the temporary shock. But the reason it blipped up was a technical matter dealing with the way they price housing. And if you exclude housing, core was 0.2, just what it was last month. And it'll be, so it's basically looking like it's holding steady core, which is what we expect is going to happen because people expect this to be a temporary energy shock. And we've seen temporary energy shocks before, and they generally don't feed through to core, which is why they forecast future top-line prices with core, not with the top-line price.
Well, okay, so I, devoutly hope it is temporary for any number of reasons.
Yeah. How do you still have a job? Either of you. Honestly, that was, if you take out one of the most important numbers, then everything is, about the same as it was. And it's just temporary because of the war that we started, that there's no end in sight. Things are going to get worse. And so are the jobs of both those two assholes. Okay, well, moving on. Speaking of assholes living in the closet, here is the Speaker of the House, Squeaker of the House. It's Mike Johnson. He was asked about how yesterday the commander-in-chief said, I don't care about the financial situation of Americans. Of course, he didn't hear it. He never hears anything because he's the speaker, not the listener.
I don't know the context in which he made that comment, but I can tell you the president thinks about Americans' financial situations. I talk to him on average twice a day, sometimes 3 or 4 times a day, and we talk about it constantly. He's laser focused on trying to resolve the conflict in Iran because if we get the Strait of Hormuz, when we get the Strait of Hormuz reopened, that will alleviate a lot of pressure with gas prices and other things in the economy.
All right, I don't know why the volume on that clip can't be fixed. I tried, I swear, but who cares? That's the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. This guy, Doug Burgum, he is the Secretary of the Interior, and he hates renewable energy, and he loves to lie about it. Anyway, here he is doing just that yesterday.
The Lazard analysis that suggests that this is the cheapest form of energy all of these projects you're describing in Nevada have one thing in common. When the sun goes down, they produce zero electricity. And this nation over-rotated towards intermittent forms of energy. And the idea that we could add intermittent and shut down baseload is what put our grid at deep risk. And the idea that it's the cheapest, if you want to add intermittent, you have to keep everything else. And so we have to have a discussion about the total cost of grid, not the cost of the incremental, because it's true on an incremental basis. You may have an incremental source, but it doesn't work. The whole machine doesn't work when the sun goes down. And there's examples from around the world of this happening. And so it's cherry picking an analysis that doesn't look. We're looking at reliable, affordable, and secure. And I would encourage everybody here to get in a skiff and to understand that most of these components, very few of these components for the solar industry are coming from the U.S. They're coming from China. And just like we had with Huawei equipment, there's modifications on those that would allow foreign governments to interfere with our grid. And I want to have a rational discussion with everybody. This is not an ideological thing. It's about reliable, affordable, and secure. Those three things.
I'm all for rational conversation about it. I'll just say we are not shutting down baseload energy to build solar. And I will contend we have battery storage as well. So
we're going to move on to the next question.
Mr. Chairman, I request unanimous consent to enter into the record this amazing new technology that apparently the Secretary is unaware of. It's a battery. China's figured it out. That's why they're cleaning our clock on clean energy, but I want to enter that into the record.
Without objection? So ordered.
Could we also include that China is the world's largest emitter as part of that submission?
And let's include the fact that far more clean energy was created in China last year. The gentleman mentioned their coal. The coal was a fraction of the new energy.
We're going to move on to the next member, or we'll never get through this hearing.
Oh, that was good. Yeah. He says a lot of gobbledygook and tries to deconstruct analysis and white papers and studies on renewable energy. And I think sometimes people have a hard time keeping up with him from what I've seen, but not the case here. And it should not be the case with anybody who's questioning that guy. They should know what they're talking about, and he should get embarrassed. And here's some more. He should be embarrassed by this. This is another clip from that hearing yesterday.
You're building a 250-foot arch to Trump that will overshadow our veterans' final resting place. And, Mr. Secretary, it's hard to understand how these projects to stroke Trump's ego do anything for the American people with their day-to-day struggles to afford daily life. And the ballooning costs of these tributes to Donald Trump really speak to the lack of fiscal responsibility in this budget, not to what you said in your testimony, that this is all about fiscal responsibility. So can you just confirm, with this arch specifically, who is this arch for? Who's it being built for?
I think you're probably aware that there's been no final agency action around building something on a site.
That was not my question about technicality on final agency action. Who's it being built for?
It's not a technicality. You're acting.
This is my question, Mr. Secretary. I'm sorry, that's the way it works. Who is the arch being built for?
The frame of your question is that there has been a approved proposal and something is actually being built.
Now, let's forget about final agency action and other legalese. There is a proposal to build this arch. Who is it for?
There's a discussion about it. I wouldn't say there's not a proposal.
Who's it for?
Well, for the American people, just like everything else in this thing, because there are 68 democratic capitals around the free world that have arches, and I guess that somehow the United States building an arch for the people to celebrate.
We're going to build one just a little taller than the one in Pyongyang because someone in the White House insists that ours be the biggest. Mr. Secretary, you may not be aware of this, but actually I'm sure you are aware. Donald Trump was asked this question specifically on the record, and he said this arch is for him. He said his answer was me. We can enter that into the record by unanimous consent if you'd like, but I'm pretty sure you're aware of that.
Yeah, that was Congressman Huffman of California. Good job. They cannot be allowed to build that arch over Arlington Cemetery. That would be very bad. I think, and should never happen. Hopefully it doesn't happen. If it does, we should take it down. Tear it down. All right. Well, I think after all that, you deserve some laughs, some comedy. Let's start with CBS Late Show. Stephen Colbert last night.
Of course, one of the big issues hanging over Trump's fabulous billionaire boys trip is the war he started over in Iran. Ships are stuck, negotiations are stalled, and the cost keeps going up. A couple of weeks ago, the administration told Congress the price tag of the war was $25 billion. Then the Pentagon upped that number to $29 billion. But now one Pentagon budget expert says the conflict will ultimately cost taxpayers at least $1 trillion. Okay, that's an enormous number. To put that in perspective, if you stacked $1 trillion, the height of the stack would measure over 67,000 miles high, which is almost as high as whoever thought that comparison would be useful. So what is America getting for our hot trilly? Way less than we were promised, because we just learned that Trump has been drastically overstating U.S. military success in Iran. Wait a minute. Are you saying our commander-in-chief was being imprecise when he gave this detailed report on combat operations?
Fire, boom, fire, boom.
What part of that don't you get? Bing, bing, bong, bong.
Yes, indeed. Very funny, Colbert, in his last few weeks there at CBS. And let's head over to NBC. I think you deserve some more comedy. Here's Seth Meyers.
President Trump arrived today in Beijing for his 2-day state visit, and apparently he's so jet-lagged that he's been sleeping at night and staying awake during meetings. President Trump is set to meet today with Chinese President Xi Jinping, and I'm sure Trump is very relieved he gets to bow instead of shaking hands. That's right, President Trump is set to meet today with Chinese President Xi Jinping and tour the historic Temple of Heaven, which he's actually done a couple of times before, but both times doctors were able to revive him. Too many at McDonald's? Yeah, I'm fine. Before departing yesterday for China, President Trump repeated his claim that Iran is not going to obtain a nuclear weapon and added, quote, "We don't play games." Pretty hard to believe, considering you literally used to have one. It's like Monopoly, except you never go to jail. The New York Times reported yesterday. The New York Times reported yesterday that U.S. intelligence assessments indicate that Iran's military remains much stronger than President Trump claims. Oh, I can explain. He lies. Might want to also check that people's sexiest man alive claim. During an Oval Office event on Monday, President Trump called Democratic lawmakers Democrats and added, quote, "because they're dumb." And once again, you know he's explaining it to us because someone had to explain it to him. Somebody in the White House, here's how it went down. Somebody in the White House said Democrats, and he was like, "Why are you saying it like that?" And then they told him, and then 5 minutes later he went, "Oh, I'm going to use that." According to a new report, the paint job on President Trump's renovation at the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool is uneven and behind schedule, because he hired the same people who do his face. FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty McCary resigned yesterday, reportedly over his opposition to the Trump administration's plan to authorize fruit-flavored e-cigarettes. And honestly, I'm surprised a guy named Dr. Marty was opposed to flavored vapes. That sounds like a brand of flavored vapes. The United States Postal Service reportedly considering allowing handguns to be sent through the mail. Oh, sure, after Mother's Day. The New York Times published a profile yesterday on Gen Z high school students who have revived the trend of playing with hacky sacks. That story again, weed's back. According to a new poll, nearly 80% of Americans believe that artificial intelligence will eliminate more jobs than it will create. And keep in mind, that's coming from people who are so old that they answer polls.
All right, Seth Meyers, good stuff as always. And that is your headlines and clip show for Wednesday. It is Thursday, though, and I've got two great guests joining me. You can watch both of these on Substack and YouTube. Coming up, Dave Daley, an update on gerrymandering. First, a first-timer, it's Joey Santore, an unlikely botanist and ecologist. He's a very interesting guy with a massive following on YouTube. Many of you already know who he is. He's out with a new book called Concrete Botany, The Ecology of Plants in the Age of Human Disturbance. This is interesting and entertaining and informative for a lot of reasons. I think you're just going to like the way that we get along and appreciate the interview for what it is a lot. I hope you do. I hope you like it. And let's do it. Wait, Joey Santore of Chicago. Grew up in Chicago. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too. Thank you for having me on this here podcast.
Yeah, man. I'm excited to talk to you, about something a little different than what we do normally, which is current events and politics and news and policy. But this is such an important issue. I guess if you want to categorize your work, I don't know, you call it environmental activism in a way, trying to say.
No, I don't really consider myself an environmentalist. Philosophically, I'm probably more of a catastrophist or maybe even a nihilist. But I'm a botanist. I got into plant science. I got into ecology, and just, I needed an outlet from paying attention to the human world because it made me want to puke most of the time when I looked at it. I grew up rather disenchanted. So, and so when I got into this, it was a really nice outlet, and then it was just also fascinating. And the more I paid attention, the more I learned, the more questions I had. Every answer opens up 10 more questions, and so it just, fucking 15, 16 years later, here I am. So
I love that. I love the origin story. You grew up in Chicago. You worked in the railroad for a long time, doing all kinds of different jobs, including, I think, an engineer. You drove the train.
Yeah. I was an engineer for like 4 years. That sucked. I regret getting my locomotive license. But before that, I was a brakeman and a conductor, and it was, it was fun. I enjoyed that. I got to work outside, banging 140-ton pieces of rolling steel together and throwing switches and breathing in, diesel exhaust and flange dust and all that shit. I'll probably get cancer in 20 years, but it was fun. And I liked the people that I worked with, even when I didn't like them. You know what I mean? It was that kind of situation. And we all hated the company because the company was always trying to fuck us. I mean, that's, I think, like anyone that works in that kind of job any job really can agree on in modern America today. And so there was, despite whatever political or religious backgrounds or cultural backgrounds, everybody hated the company, and that like created a sense of solidarity among us.
That's really interesting, and probably interesting about it. A bunch of other, as you just mentioned, industries and jobs. So how did you get off of that job and into the one you created for yourself now? I mean, you used basically YouTube and making videos and all. I mean, how did you become such a big deal that you could quit your job?
Well, I mean, I didn't, when I heard out with the railroad, I didn't want it to be a career. I mean, the best part of any job is, being able to quit it. Mm-hmm. Or the best thing about any job. And so, I said, I'll do this until it sucked. And it didn't suck. It didn't suck bad enough to quit for like 15 years. And then I just lucked out. Like when it got bad enough to suck, when they started doing the precision scheduled railroading, which is their term for cutting jobs and that kind of thing. And piling more work on the remaining jobs. When it started to get that bad, the botany stuff, all this social media bullshit had already picked up. And I realized like, maybe I'm able to do this and make it work. And so that's what I did. So I've been doing this, it started off, I got into plants, I got into exploring cool places, geology, shit like that, and was posting it on social media, on Instagram stories, but they disappear after 24 hours. And so someone messaged me and they said, you should put these on YouTube so they last longer. You're seeing some really cool things in some habitats that probably won't be around in 20 or 30 years at the rate we're going. Everything's getting developed. And so I said, yeah, that makes sense. And I thought YouTube was kind of a toilet, but I was like, fuck it. I'll put these up. And then more people liked it, but I also like made it fun. I would like, it was like a comedy sketch, like talking like this Chicago fucking mook, which, I mean, I talk like a little bit, but I turn it up to like a 10 because I think that's funny. I think it's fucking hilarious. Some people are like, oh, you don't really talk like that. It's like, yeah, it's a fucking joke. It's part of the gimmick. It's a joke,
Whatever it takes to get this type of subject matter in front of people. And I think that you're uniquely tailored for that. You're really talented. But does it insult you when I'm sure people say this, oh, well, not the likeliest path to becoming a content creator that is talking about botany and ecology and plant life, does it bother you that, people are like, oh, what do you know? And why should I listen to this guy about plants?
No, because people don't. I mean, you get the people who say that maybe are academics who feel a little territorial about something they, spent $200,000 and student debt on trying to learn. And then who's this schmuck? And I've gotten that a little bit, mostly from young people. The older people surprisingly don't. The older like professors and botanists should have been mostly, friendly and into it and helpful. But no, it doesn't. I mean, I'm sure like people. There's people lobbing turds at you from all different angles. Like eventually you just learn to ignore it. You're like, hey, fucking jerk up, whatever.
I just love that. In this case, in your case, I just love that you're this guy delivering this material in this way. 500,000 almost YouTube followers, like 200,000 Instagram followers. I didn't even check other media platforms if you're posting on them. You got this new book, and it's all for really, really good purposes. You say you don't necessarily identify as a, quote, environmentalist. I don't care what you call yourself. If you're doing whatever you can to advocate for and to be a lobbyist for plants and critters, I'm on board, because nobody is defending plants anywhere, hardly ever.
I mean, those, plants are just it's just the real world. It's most of the world. That's the way I look at it. That's the real world. The stuff that people have made up is all bullshit. It's ephemeral. It doesn't last that long. It's very short lived. Like when you look at when you get a concept of geologic time and you realize how recent all this bullshit is, it's both relieving. Some people, I'm sure, maybe scares them, but to me, it's like relieving. It's like, this is fucking nothing. And then you look at these things that have been around forever, whether it's, a rock outcropping, a layer of limestone, or an organism, you're like, that's what's real. I mean, and also it supports everything that we need to survive. I mean, plants are the basis of the terrestrial biome on Earth.
So even if you could care less about plants and you were afraid to step on the grass and you were solely self-interested in your life and the human species, you would still look like an idiot or an asshole, because without plants, you don't get to exist. I mean, it's not you don't have to go to grad school to understand that, and yet we pave over everything. And then have to have lawns if we do have them.
And most people think, they think, oh, we just need crops and everything. Well, you need everything, even like the little weeds. If they evolved there in that region where you live, then they're part of the living machine there. They're part of the whole Jenga tower. You start taking pieces out, the whole thing collapses. You can't just mechanize everything to the point where, all that's left of the ecosystem is what you can directly use, because everything is important. It indirectly supports you. All this shit is tied together, right? We see that with like insect populations collapsing. Like, well, I don't care. So all we need is the honeybees. Like, no, you fucking, right there, like that shows the ignorance, it's like a tweaker with his head under the fucking, hood of a Dodge, just throwing pieces out. I don't need this. All we need is the engine and the transmission. We don't need any fucking anything else here,
It's exactly right, and a great way to explain ecology and how it works and why it matters, which is why I think it's a huge part of your appeal. But what are you trying to do now? Because you've got this YouTube channel and Instagram, and you're traveling all over the world now, and I feel like you're kind of a consultant in a way to local governments, countries' governments, or individual homeowners. Even you're popping into places and telling people how we should live in a way, and I subscribe to it. I'm in no way, I support it. I think it's great what you're doing, which is why I'm happy to have you here. But how do you describe what your work is now with all the stuff you're doing?
I think we live in this system that only places emphasis again on these things that we think directly affect us, without realizing everything is important. Everything affects us. Like, we don't make space for plants in our culture unless they're crops or medicinal or stuff. So I'm trying to, I guess, open people's eyes to that and get them to appreciate and value these things like human beings did for most of our 300,000 to 1 million years as a species, right? We needed plants. We were familiar with them. We had a relationship with them. And, most people now, like for me, I grew up in Chicago. I had no idea, one, what a native plant was, or two, like what the meaning was. by native, or two, what any of the native plants were there. Like all the cool, it's tall grass prairie there. You get a little bit of marsh, whatever. I had no idea what tall grass prairie or oak savannas were. Right. And, the way we make space for it in our culture is like, oh, it's pretty and it's a nice place to go hang out. It's like, no, motherfucker. These keep the land alive. They keep the whole biome functioning, and our very myopic, narrow-sighted, field of vision. We think these places don't matter. They're just feel good, Hallmark greeting card backgrounds, but there's so much more than that. It's literally like a fucking living machine that supports everything. And I think especially, when I go so many places, humans are so good at creating ugly places, and especially like in the United States with the suburban sprawl, or, I see this shit all over the place, right? Just concrete and cutting down trees and just, oh, this is as good as another. So if this tree evolved 6,000 miles away and is highly invasive here, who gives a fuck? It's a tree, plant it, our views on horticulture, like this, the plant, as long as it's quote pretty, whatever the fuck that means, like just put it in the ground, whatever. And so we just create these, weird landscapes that are devoid of any ecological context. And just seeing that, like all the concrete and the fucking asphalt, and then just realizing like how dehumanizing it just makes you feel like shit. It really does. I don't think people realize how much that affects them subconsciously, when you live in like suburban sprawl, or if it's like a, urban wasteland, whatever.
There's got to be some experiment that has tried to measure it. I mean, just anecdotally, I live in Rockland County, and I commuted to Midtown Manhattan every day for 12 years. And if I went on the Palisades Parkway, it was a lot more kind of peaceful and calming to me because it's tree lined and not a lot, and there's parks and you can't see houses. If I went the other way, it's all houses and buildings and bridges and strip malls and just gross litter everywhere.
Like people with these shitty grins trying to sell you shit. The fact that people think that doesn't affect them, that you can be exposed to that shit for, an hour commute every day or more, and it's not going to affect you or like dehumanize you.
That's so right. I mean, I'm sure a lot of comedians, I used to want to do this bit, but like each billboard, I didn't even think about that. The lawyer, the breast reduction.
Yeah, it's the dumbest shit. It's the fucking dumbest shit.
Call 1-800-JESUS or any other number of different kinds of billboards can send you on an hour-long spiral in your depending on how long you're driving. So no matter what it is, it's affecting you. How did you arrive at this interest? I know growing up you had a kind of an affinity towards it, but you grew up in Chicago. But was there a book, a teacher, an experience, a documentary, something that really turned you on, that got you into all of the work you're doing around botany, ecology, protecting plants?
No, there were a couple things I think that maybe influenced me, but I didn't have any insight into plant science or any of that shit, when I was younger. I think I got sent to this outward bound program for bad kids when I was like 13. And I spent 2 months there, and I was there with kids that like got sent there by the courts for selling, acid or for stabbing somebody or whatever. So, and it was in southern Utah, and the people that ran it was weird because southern Utah is all Mormon, but the people that ran it were kind of like hippies, right? And this is before cell phones, so like we had they had giant walkie talkies to reach out to base camp for like a re-up on food once a week. And I think being out there, I was scared at first and hated it and felt really alone. But after a week or two, I loved it. And it was so fucking peaceful and calming. And I didn't realize how much that affected me. And this is like 15, 20 years before I got into plants, 15 years. And so, but I realized later, like that really, I just realized what good medicine that was, to be around. And then wanting to just learn about it and describe it came later when I was living on the West Coast. And I don't know. And then I got to the point I was reading textbooks at work, and stealing papers online, because they're all paywalled and shit. Downloading papers online and reading them about things I was interested in, because I would just had questions. I mean, I think that's just the essential tool for learning anything, understanding it, not just memorizing it like American education teaches us to do. Memorize it so you can get a good job and hate your life for the next 30 years. Instead of that, like make sure you actually understand it. Like, are you curious about it? Are you passionate? Like, why the fuck do the stars, what's going on up there if you want to be an astronomer, or like what's going on with this living thing in front of me. Why does it flower at night? Why this certain species? Oh, because it's moth pollinated. Why does it grow out of only limestone? I never see it growing anywhere else. You know, it's that kind of stuff. Just asking questions, and then really trying to figure out why. You know, being good at acquiring your own information, which is so easy now with the you know.
It's also easy to get misinformation now, especially I'm sure you run up against this all the time. I mean, in a way, I saw this one video you made, which I think I might tag at the beginning of this so people get to know your humor, your style, where you're just going off on the idea of having a lawn. Like, what happened to you was the kind of the premise. Like, how did you arrive at this conclusion in your life that you should have a lawn, that you should do all these things to it? And you've got this whole show. What is it? Kill Your Lawn, and this movement.
Yeah.
And I'm moving back into my house, and I think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to, revitalize it with native species and kill my lawn for the most part. But that's something that people in our culture, in our country, have been taught to desire, and also is a measure of your self-worth, your success. Look at that big lawn with no weeds, because weeds are bad. They're like
weird. It's weird. It's weird. Lawn's good for soccer. You know, if you want to play the sports or some shit, if you got a big enough spot, or like, parks have lawns, so you can go, throw a blanket down and have movie night in the park, or like, people keep a little patch of grass for the dog to have, have a spot to take a shit. But other than that, it's fucking nuts. And the amount of water, like where you live, it's not too bad. You get enough rain for it to not be, that much of an issue. But where I live, it's fucking nuts. I mean, there's wild peyote 30 minutes away from me. Like, it's basically thorn scrub. It's not quite a desert where you get a little more rain, but it's so insanely hot. And I see people trying to have these lawns just pissing away. We don't have the water, man. All of Texas is fucked for water. Like, our water's just not there. Like, those aquifers are not coming back anytime soon. They take 20,000 years to recharge. And so it's nuts down here. And then I think just, for me, like, I get bored with that. Like, my yard is full of native plants, all kind of cool shit I see. I got like 3 different species of lizards. They keep the roaches down. I got frogs. They keep all their pest insects down. I get cool birds stopping by. So, the whole idea of getting rid of a lawn is not just like for low maintenance, though it's a lot less maintenance than mowing, but it's to get people out there and get to know the shit around them. And I've seen some people do this. And I think especially for a lot of dudes, it's really important too. Like, cause a lot of fucking dudes are really tightly wound. And, I see a lot of men just who have, they come home, they get fucking hammered because their job sucks or their life. And I think for a lot of dudes, like, I've had so many people reach out to me and be like, man, after I killed my lawn, the shit I see in my yard is fucking amazing. I get to go hang out with the birds. I get these cool fucking birds. Now they got all these apps. You can figure out what you're looking at, what bird it is. I can figure out what native plants are growing on me. And it's like, it's fucking soothing. It's like a healthy thing to do. It's to who knew 300,000 years of humans forming a relationship with plants, like that's part of our genome, that it would feel good, right? That it's basically, a healthy, activity. So that's a big part of it. Yeah, I mean, the lawn thing is fucking nuts. I mean, even if you can just set up a little patch of like native, flowering perennial shrubs, whatever, it's good. It's a good activity. So
I'm having frozen internet issues.
Mm-hmm. Did that just cut out, or did you get that?
I am frozen.
I can hear you, but the video's frozen. Can you hear me still?
Oh, you can hear me? Okay, good. Well, I can hear you still. I don't know what's going on with my video, but that is a hilarious frozen face that I had for a minute there. I love everything you just said about men. I talk a lot about mental health, especially for middle-aged guys, things I've gone through. And what you just said is a great remedy for so much of what ails us, because getting in contact with nature puts everything into perspective. And as you just described it better than I can or want to add to it this moment. It's a really, really good point for all of us. Now,
I live in a state too, like Texas is like, you get that lunk-headed meathead shit where like if you go to therapy, you're a pussy, that kind of like that view is like dominant here. It's fucking depressing. It's kind of hilarious just because it's so stupid. It's depressing too. It's like, God, there's so many dudes that are just fucking dying on the inside who like won't deal with any of the, 30 years of repressed trauma. So anyway.
I talk about that all the time. FYI, you want to spend an hour talking about that with me with your views on it? No matter what, I'm happy to talk about it because I think in a way, talking about it is what saved a lot of men. And the idea of the toughest guy in the world is the guy that confronts his demons.
I've been sober.
Strong.
I've been sober 10 years, and I'm the toughest motherfucker I've ever seen. Was like he was a fucking MMA guy. I think he actually fell off the wagon and went back to using heroin. But we won't talk about that. Life is hard. But for 5 or 6 years, he was sober, and I remember hearing him talk and just be straight up like, you know why I did that? Because I wanted people to like me, or like why I did a certain thing, or why I acted like this, and just being honest. Like I was full of shit. I just want people to like me, and I was like, God damn, that guy really is fucking tough. Because a lot of people, would never admit that. A lot of dudes would never. They're afraid. They're afraid about how they look and whatever. It was pretty.
Yeah, the way that we measure strength is bizarre, and the way that we define masculinity is also bizarre. What if we defined it like by taking care of plants and being a decent person to other human beings, and not wanting to take everything for yourself? Getting back,
and sticking up for little people, for the fucking, you could still. I'm not saying fighting is always wrong, but it's. But
exactly, standing up for anybody who's being bullied. That's what I've been. That's my entire brand. And frankly, I mean, I don't think it's too far to say that when we're stepping outside of our species, the thing that gets the most bullied is plants. Sure, some can kill you. They fight back, the ones that can kill you. I get poison ivy every spring. It sucks. But but what I mean more, and you've talked about this a lot, is how we're just paving over everything. Our economic system, our greed, whatever you want to call it, is destroying environments all over the world. And there has to be somebody that stands up for the little plant, if you will, much less the dandelion, which I take the heads off them, frankly, because I cut my lawn sometimes.
No, dandelions ain't native. They're, Italians would go pick the leaves for greens and shit. They don't. My dad's cousin used to always tell this joke about the old Italian ladies who'd be like in the middle of Cicero Avenue in Chicago picking the dandelion greens in the middle of the road because those were the ones that the dogs couldn't get to piss on. But meanwhile, they're covered in like tire dust and fucking diesel exhaust and shit. It was like, we don't mind about that. We just don't want the ones that the dogs peed on.
I want to talk more about that and Italians in general. So the new book, Concrete Botany, The Ecology of Plants in the Age of Human Disturbance. Who's it for? I'm loving it. I love your approach to everything. I love your delivery. I love the content, obviously, but who wants to read this book? What's in it?
I wrote it for people that don't know a lot about botany or about plants yet, or don't know like what a native species is or why that's important. I wrote it, by just trying to imagine myself like 15 years ago, and trying to answer some of those basic questions. And then, it's got a lot in there too about just what comes up in cities, right? Like what plants grow in cities, not the ones that are planted, because those always look like shit to me. They're always hedged and planted in uniform lines and have this weird sense of neurotic control kind of ingrained into them. But like the ones that come up like at the edge of a train yard or out of a crack in the sidewalk, or like, at the foot of an abandoned building or something like that, the plants that just the volunteer, right? And it's always a mixture of native stuff and then invasive stuff. If you're in New York, it'd be mostly invasive European weeds, whatever. But just getting people to, the whole point is just getting people to pay attention to this more. Not because it's like not because it's like not a feel good effort, but it's something that just makes you feel better. It's good medicine. It's there's a dopamine shot you get from it eventually.
There's a debate amongst experts, is my understanding, around invasive species and what should be done to either prevent them, slow them, kill them, or assimilate to them and allow them in. And not all invasive species of plants or bugs, whatever, are equal, I suppose. If one fish is eating all the fish in Lake Superior, or if this one beetle is destroying every single tree in New York. We can talk about it, but like when it comes to invasive plants, I once said I wanted to plant some bamboo in my yard for a privacy. And the lady at the nursery, I didn't know who she was. She made me feel like the smallest human alive. She really got mad at me. Why would you do that? We don't sell that here. And so what is your view on invasive species in general?
There's invasive and there's non-native. Like every invasive species is non-native. It didn't evolve on this continent in most cases. but not every non-native is invasive. Like some non-natives don't really get out of control. Maybe it doesn't rain enough where they're being planted for them. They wouldn't, establish. But invasive species are a thing because they don't have the checks and balances. Again, it's you got to take a broader context. You got to zoom out, right? It's not just about the plant itself. It's about the ecosystem that it came from. Like kudzu has taken over the American South. Why? Because all the insects that keep it in check in its native Asia don't exist here, nor should they necessarily be brought here because they've moved to other members of the legume family, which kudzu is a part of, right? But when you see kudzu in habitat in parts of Asia where it grows, and it's quote behaved. It doesn't take over. It doesn't climb up the trees and form these walls of impenetrable green, right? Because there's all this shit in the ecosystem there that takes it down, that controls it, and they've evolved together, right? Same thing with like chestnut blight in the Americas, right? Chinese chestnut and the chestnut fungus evolved together over 9 million years in an evolutionary arms race, right? So Chinese chestnuts can take the blight without getting sick and dying. But American chestnuts didn't evolve with them. So they don't have any of those. They didn't evolve any of those parts of their genome that can attack the fungus back. And so they just get annihilated and they die. Right. So it's that distance as well as that long amount of time since the American and Chinese chestnuts diverged 10 million years ago that accounts for why American chestnuts have no blight. So it's like with any invasive species, it's like that. It's a metric of time and distance. Right. And a plant being a part of an ecosystem and just not having any controls in its arrival ecosystem, in this case, North America. So
I love this guy. I've been saying for at least a decade how much I hate lawns, says Ty in the chat. Live chat, people watching. Joey Santore is my guest. His new book is Concrete Botany, The Ecology of Plants in the Age of Human Disturbance. He's got a huge presence on YouTube and on Instagram as well. Instagram tells you who of your friends or followers are following this person. And I want to give a shout out to Aaron the Farmer and Carrie, who are both listeners of this show, might be excited that Joey is here talking to me because they're already fans before I even started talking to him. So when we talk about lawns and we talk about gardens, everything always insinuates that you own a home. Most people don't own a home, and you focus a lot on urban areas. And you have this section in your book called Illegal Garden, which is a story about where you grew up, I think, in Chicago. But talk a little bit more about urban centers and how everybody can take part.
I think, plants, cities need plants more than anywhere else because we got the densest human presence. Right, like my ideal human city is one where every 3 or 4 blocks there's a block dedicated to being a fucking park, with like a native plant area in it that is what the habitat was for hundreds of thousands of years before Europeans came. But if you live in a city, there's all kinds of shit you can do. Whether it's like growing cacti in your house over the winter with a LED light. They make these really efficient LED lights now.
Oh yeah, I've got them.
Or just what I used to do, I would just start scattering seeds along fence lines in vacant lots. I always trespassed as a kid. Always,
does that work?
Abandoned areas. It depends. If you're high enough rainfall and there's barren soil, it does. I don't advocate just like broadcasting. Maybe in some cases, but it just depends. It depends what's already growing there. It depends if there's cleared soil. I like fence lines because if they do come in to mow the lot, they can't, they normally stop at a chain link fence. They can't go through the fence. There's parks. There's like groups you can get involved with. You can start, looking for like neglected areas, whether it's median strips or whatever, and you can get native plants in there. New York City's got a whole bunch of people doing shit like this. So there's a bunch of stuff to do, I think, and then of course, just like lurking around botanic gardens. Right, there's some whack shit in the botanic garden. You get a little bit of that, like rich grandma Hallmark greeting card bullshit, but there's also sometimes some cool stuff too. There's a lot of botanic gardens getting into native ecology.
I feel like there's a botanic garden in a lot of major cities in America, and that's really important because that's where else are you going to take your kids on a field trip, and that's important. Brings me to the Children in Nature Network. I don't know are you familiar with that organization? oh, I got to connect with them. They love you because I think to me, this issue or any issue, but especially this one, the one that you care so much about, if you really want to make a difference, you got to connect kids with nature at a young age so they can appreciate it. So that's great that there's a botanical garden. That's great that there's a park that kids can go visit. But if kids don't know where their food comes from, if kids don't know that they're basically as important as that beetle or bug, or, you know, have that philosophy drilled into them at some point in their life, then they never understand. They take everything for granted and they end up building, you know, being developers and building strip malls.
Yeah, and turning into a fucking sociopath too. You know what's the most depressing shit though is when you meet kids that are afraid of bugs.
Yeah.
Fuck. Like my daughter, she's been picking up spiders, and I had to tell her, like, look, there are some spiders you got to be careful. Some, like the garden spiders or weavers, they're cool, but some spiders can bite, you know. But also, I don't want to freak her out too much.
My daughter loves bugs so much she has a pet Lone Star tick. That was a joke. But the point is, the point is taken. And I was that way with my daughters growing up. I would get mad at them. Like they would see a negative reaction from me if they flipped out about a bug. And then I would give them a lecture, which they never heard. But
like afraid to get dirty or afraid. You see people that are just, or like, and this is real where you live because the tick population is bad due to 200 years of fire suppression and deer overpopulation. But, you know, like you every time you see the comments of these shit posts, these fucking squares, they see a native plant garden. They're like, oh, the ticks. Shut the fuck up. How are the ticks going to get in there? Are there deer hanging out in your yard? Maybe like the ticks need a vector to get in. But like, I've never had a single tick in my yard. What the fuck? You know, if I did, I'd probably start burning parts of it down and shit. But that's why the ticks are so bad in the Northeast. The native people were burning those fucking forests for thousands of years. And if you don't think, we have the soil records to prove it. We've got plants that only respond to fire. Fire was a huge part of North American ecosystems, you know, but now you've had 200 years of fire suppression and the predators are all wiped out and the deer are everywhere and not enough people hunt anymore. And so it's just been a nightmare. But yeah, the fire kills the ticks and it kills the duff that they need to keep their, you know, the humidity up. Yeah. There's a really good video on that from this guy that does this YouTube channel called Learn Your Land. And it's all about like, why are ticks so bad now? You know, and don't know how to fucking manage a forest. That's why.
I really love talking to you, man. I've really, as much as I've enjoyed talking to you, I've enjoyed just watching your videos and doing everything I need to prepare to talk to you about your new book. And I hope that we can do it again. And I'd love to work with you on any number of things and support your work because I think it's super, super important. Everybody should go get the book and subscribe to the YouTube and the Instagram. Are you somewhere else besides YouTube and Instagram that you're big?
There's a Facebook page that some company just signed me up with. Then they abandoned it. But yeah, so Facebook, and that actually works. You get a lot of boomers that way. It's good for them.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. TikTok. I don't really do TikTok too much. I forget to update it, but yeah, I'm on all that shit. Yeah.
I love it. I love what you're doing. I think it's really important. I love the way you do it. And I'm a big fan. I appreciate you joining me, Joey.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
All right, there you go. Joey Santore. Go get the book, Concrete Botany. Thank you to Steve Roth, who is a listener and supporter and the publicist for this book, who reached out to me. And I really appreciate that, Steve. It was great. Now let's get to Dave Daley with an update on gerrymandering. And you got to get all of David Daley's books. Follow him online. Everything you can find out more about Dave on the show notes, as well as all the rest of my guests. Let's do it right now with David Daley. All right, Dave Daley is here, and I've got to get an update on gerrymandering. I can't keep track of it. Nobody does it better and explains it better than you, sir. Thank you for joining me today.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Lots happening. We talked right after the Supreme Court decision. You and Siegel wrote a great article together for The Guardian to talk about the consequences and more. And now states have been making all kinds of moves and changes, some predictable, some not. Where do you want to start? Tennessee?
Yeah, Tennessee's the easiest place, I think. That district in Memphis had been a black majority district, going back almost 100 years, and it's now been chopped up in 3 pieces by Republicans. They've taken parts of the city, they've pulled it all the way into central Tennessee. This is going to be a Republican pickup. It's going to turn Tennessee into a 9-0 Republican map. But that's just the beginning, right? The 4 seats in Florida that we start off with, because conservatives and Ron DeSantis there anticipated where this court was going and understood that the time had arrived to go ahead and do a new map. And they got it right. So if you go 4 in Florida, if you go with 1 in Tennessee, and then you move down to Louisiana, where the Calais case was based, they are going to go ahead and get to work on a 6-0 map. They've already canceled the congressional primaries that voting was underway in order to get that map worked out. There's actually machinations underway in Alabama as well, where there are 2 seats currently held by Black Democrats that the state has gone to the Supreme Court and said, we would like special dispensation to go ahead and rework this map this year. Lo and behold, the conservative supermajority on the Supreme Court said yes.
What about, did you mention South Carolina?
It does not look like they will make a move on South Carolina this year. There is one brave Republican lawmaker who has stood up there and said, we're not going to do it. It was funny. His quote, it was something to the extent of, South Carolina is already one of the most gerrymandered states in the country. We don't have to do anything else here. Now, there will be a lot more to come. Republicans will go back in 2028 in the states where it's too late for them to do anything now, and they'll go after those seats then. So there's 2 in Georgia, probably an additional seat in Florida, an additional seat or 2 in Texas, the St. Louis, Missouri seat, probably South Carolina, Mississippi. They will get themselves really close to the 19 seats that it will be possible to pick up by erasing these Voting Rights Act districts essentially off the map entirely. And then they will move to the seats that they left on the table this time around.
Right.
But they will move to Indiana, where Donald Trump led a primary campaign against the state senators that stood in the way of redistricting this year, and most of those lawmakers lost. So there will likely be the votes next year to go ahead and redistrict Indiana, which could add an additional 2 seats to the Republican side. You then add Kansas, you add Kentucky, you add New Hampshire if Republicans can hold on to their trifecta there this fall, and you've got an awful lot of seats. Now, Democrats will keep fighting, of course, and there are seats that Democrats can go after as well, and I expect we will see a lot of that ahead of the 2028 cycle, but they are pretty stuck when it comes to this year.
Democrats are. So when politicians pick their voters, it makes it much easier for them to win, almost guaranteed in certain districts. But some analysts I'm reading, hearing, seeing, following, feeling say maybe it backfires. Sometimes when you try to take someone from somebody, something, in this case, the right to vote from black folks specifically, they all hear about it. It makes them really mad, indignant, as a matter of fact. And so they organize in a way they might not have had the election been down, in this case, the quote, normal or traditional lines. Do you think this backfires anywhere where it's been done?
Really hard to see that happening. It certainly can happen, right? Georgia put all of those new voting measures in place after 2020, right? And people simply worked harder, organized harder, and managed to overcome them. Sometimes if you give a really good runner a 10-pound weight, they can still beat you, but they have to work a whole lot harder, and that's a lot of effort that was not going into other things. They call it a dummy-mander when a gerrymander backfires. And ever since the modern redistricting era began, when the technology became so good after the 2010 census, there have not been any Republican dummy-manders. There was one Democratic gerrymander.
The technology, you mean, that allows political campaigns to find out where voters live and then create.
When they draw these lines, it's like they're playing the coolest video game in the world. They can go up and down streets and they know everything about everybody in these houses because we leave all the breadcrumbs on the internet, because they've got all the public and private data sets on us, and they're able to carve us up with exquisite perfection.
Do they have I've always thought they have your voter registration and if and when you last voted, but you're talking about more information that they have on income, on job, on all kinds of things about us?
They've got all the census data. And all that census data is down to the block level, so it's very precise and refined. There's all of the public data sets. If you register your car, they know what kind of car you drive. That can tell you how you vote sometimes. It's certainly a clue. Do you have a hunting license? Do you have a gun license? All of those kinds of data sets are very easily available.
What about my Trump gold statue?
Everything that you do online can be purchased as well for pennies. And all of that can get fed into these programs, and they can go up and down streets, and they know everything about everybody as they are drawing these lines. This is a science, and they've got it absolutely mastered. I have sat down with map makers as they're doing it, and it's terrifying. It is fascinating and terrifying.
They do it also. It's
so precise.
They do it at the town level too. I'm sure my town redrew the districts recently. We call them wards. The wards here in the town of Clarkstown, New York. People can look it up. I'm not sure how partisan it was, but by the way, I interrupted you with more of an explanation on what technology is available for different political parties, different candidates, and so on. And I'm not sure if you were done with what you were saying there, but I have something else.
No, I'm done.
Okay,
Absolutely.
So what do you say to those who say that this is not about race?
That is certainly what Republicans are arguing, right? The time of racial animus in this country is over, right? Things have changed. But if you look at the maps, right, if you look at, and there have been some really wonderful graphics that explain this in pictures far better than I can explain it in words, but if you were to look at a map of the South, it's going to be represented almost 100% by white Republican lawmakers after 2026 and 2028. There will be maybe a dot of blue around Atlanta, and maybe a district in Florida. We're looking at almost a solid Republican white South, and what we're looking at is almost no black representation in these states at all. And what we're going to see is the largest drop-off in black political representation in Congress that we have seen at any time since Reconstruction. There were states in the South that barely elected any black members of Congress in the entire 20th century. If you look at a state like North Carolina, when Eva Clayton and Mel Watt finally got into Congress in 1992, they were the first blacks elected since and that is what we are about to return to. We're going to have an electoral map of entirely red delegations from red states, entirely blue delegations from blue states. We've had this kind of map before. We just called it the Union and the Confederacy back then.
There are some more conservative-minded con law scholars that are now calling this the worst decision in a generation, or since Dred Scott, or any number of comparisons. How do you characterize it? Do you agree with those characterizations of this Supreme Court basically gutting the voting rights decision?
This is what this court has been trying to do for more than a dozen years. This is John Roberts' life's work. They have set about shredding and scribbling over the Voting Rights Act in any way that they can. And they've done so dishonestly. They've done so disingenuously. You go back to the Shelby County case in 2013 that kicked this off, right? John Roberts says things have changed in the South, except he uses a law on equal sovereignty that he made up. He uses census data that he got wrong. And yet still in this case, he says that even though the preclearance formula is going to be frozen, there is still always Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And then they get to work on taking Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act apart, right? You go to the Rucho case on partisan gerrymandering from 2019. John Roberts writes in this case that was another one of the most terrible cases of the last 50 years, that he closes federal courts to partisan gerrymandering claims. He says it's not a political issue that the courts can properly adjudicate. And yet he says, I'm not leaving complaints about redistricting to echo into a void. He calls partisan gerrymandering unseemly. And then in this new decision in Calais, they say partisan gerrymandering is protected, and we have to protect the partisan gerrymanders from being challenged as racial gerrymanders. So we also have to get rid of these guardrails against racial gerrymandering. The court is constantly moving the ball and changing the rules and offering a different explanation because it's playing politics. It's not doing law.
I saw a testimony, I don't know if it was during his confirmation hearing, John Roberts, though, he was asked about the voting rights, and he basically said it was settled. Something like that.
He said that it was settled, and Democrats believed him. In Anti-Democratic, I talked to Senator Russell Feingold, who served on the committee that questioned Roberts' judiciary, and asked him some of the very best questions. And then ultimately, the committee voted to confirm Roberts and send him on. And I asked him about this. I said, with the 20 years of hindsight. And he said, we never imagined he would go after voting rights. We all thought it was settled, right? And when you think about it, Congress had reauthorized the Voting Rights Act in 2006 and those activities were ongoing at the same time that Alito and Roberts were being confirmed to the Supreme Court. It was 98-0 in the Senate. It was 390-36 in the House. President George W. Bush signs it into law. So this was not really contested in Congress at all because Republicans were afraid to go at it because the Voting Rights Act is popular and important. This is the most effective civil rights legislation that the country has ever had. And yet, at the same time, they made an end run on it by putting these justices on the court who would do their dirty work for them and not require these politicians to actually have their fingerprints on the knife going into the VRS.
So well said. And everybody should get anti-democratic inside the right's 50-year plot to control American elections. It explains so much of this. Can, as John Roberts, I think, said, Congress pass a law to fix what the Supreme Court has broken and return these districts to more fair lines and get rid of partisan gerrymandering the way the Democrats have wanted to for over a decade? I believe they've had a bill. There's the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. There's other legislation that has passed the House in the past with Democrats in the majority. What would the House and Senate have to look like for there to be a congressional solution to the damage that has been done to bring us back to the 1890s?
I think what we need is a Democratic trifecta after 2028 that is ready for bold action on day one and as part of a 100-day plan has a complete package of political reform that meets this really dangerous moment. And I think that package has to start with reform of the Supreme Court. It has to start by reining in this arrogant, lawless, super legislature that believes it can effectively do whatever it wants in this moment. The court has to be enlarged. Its jurisdiction has to be shrunk. It needs a term limit. You need to not be able to time your retirement in order to have a president of your own party pick a successor. There's a lot of things that could be done to fix this court. And then we have to look at districting as a piece of that. I think the best way forward is a more proportional House, along the lines that Jamie Raskin and Don Beyer have suggested, multi-member districts, ranked choice voting. They call it the Fair Representation Act. That would I think it would meet the moment when it comes to being certain that every state in the country not only looks like the politics of that state, but that there's also fair representation for communities of color. Every state, voters ought to be represented according to their numbers. We are so very far away from that.
Yeah.
It will take a Democratic trifecta, and it will take bold, urgent action, because this isn't getting better. If Democrats don't take bold, urgent action, there's going to be reapportionment after the 2030 census, and somewhere between 12 to 14 seats are going to go from blue states where lines are drawn by Democrats to red states. And it's not just U.S. House seats that move, it's electoral college votes that go with it. So the road for Democrats to the House and the presidency in 2032 gets notably tougher. Donald Trump will likely be gone, but this court, on the other hand, will be here for decades if we don't take the moment we have and fix it.
Yes, his legacy, probably the worst part of it, is the people, the men that, and Amy Coney Barrett, who he appointed to the Supreme Court. Oh, man. All right. I appreciate the update and the outlook and the honesty and the continued journalism that you are putting in to keep track of all this for us, because it's confusing. I just see headlines every day.
And it's going to get crazier. Come next year, Democrats will start the fight back in New Jersey and Colorado and New York, probably California again, multiple states that they control, Illinois, Maryland. So it's going to be a free-for-all, but it's not good for voters. It's not good for the state of democracy.
You'll hold our hand all the way through it, Dave Daley. Thank you very much for joining me today. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention before I say goodbye?
Anytime. I'm really fun at parties. I have a stand-up act.
I bet it's amazing, actually. I can't wait to see it. I'm looking forward to that party that you do where you talk about all of this and so much more. All right, bud. I appreciate it. All right, there he goes, Dave Daley. I don't know what was going on with his audio that was changing back and forth, if you noticed. I'm sure I'll get complaints. I apologize. But we'll fix it for the next time, because I always give people regular guest tips on how to make it better, and they always listen. So I'm appreciative of that, and I'm appreciative of Dave and Joey for joining me today, and mostly for you, for being here, for being you, for supporting with a paid subscription, which I can't do the show without. So thanks. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. You can always upgrade and pay more. That would make my day to see that the work is mattering to you that much. So if you listen a lot, maybe you can pay more if you can afford to. All right. I appreciate it very much. I hope to see you at tonight's hangout. You bumblebees, thank you for listening all the way to the end. Go say hi to my guests online. Let them know that you appreciated them joining me, Dave and Joey, that is. And anybody else. All right. Talk to you later. Go support John Carroll and all the other creative people in the stand-up community. More info in the show notes. Be the change you want to see today, folks.
Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know us right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where they had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well, and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.